Hi, and welcome to Parting the Clouds. My name is Annette Hegner, and we shed the light on the darkness of emotional bondage through real-life testimonials. Hi, and welcome to the show today. I am so honored to have two very special guests with me that I've actually known since I was a child. And we went to the same church back in Miraloma, and then we were in the same youth group through junior high and high school, Jennifer and I. And so we go really far back. And I've also known her mother, Diane, here since that time. And I'm really honored to have them here. Jennifer has a very, very powerful story of something that happened to her back in, July of 2000. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Jen, and then they'll get into their story. So Jennifer Gardner Habicht was 23 years old in July of 2000, and she was living her best life. When she was a child, they lived in Riverside, and she attended a Christian school. And after that, she was working for Mary S. Roberts Shelter, a no-kill shelter. And she would rescue dogs and cats from local shelters for rehab and adoption before they were to be euthanized. She had a love for animals and wanted to be a veterinarian someday. She had recently moved out into the country where she would ride horses and run rescues, overflow kennels. She's always loved animals and had more than most during her life. Her favorite pastime was when she was riding, or wasn't riding her horses, was hanging out with her brothers and sisters and also working in the children's ministry at her church. Life was good, and she held a wonderful and exciting potential, and she was very blessed. There are time markers in our lives that are created when huge events take place. An example of this would be when you graduate from high school or when you get married. Most of the time, these time markers are created by decisions that we make. She had no way of knowing that someone else's bad decision would create that time marker for her and all of her family. Things forever were labeled either BC or AC, which was before the crash or after the crash. That was her new time marker. Her life as she knew it died that day. So it's an incredible testimony. So please welcome Jen and Diane to the show, and let's get started. So tell us about what happened.
Well, you better start because I wasn't there. I was there, but I wasn't awake to.
Yeah. So, well, the day of the actual crash, we were celebrating my grandson's 6th birthday. And he actually had gotten a new dog. And Jen worked at the no-kill shelter. And she lived at the kennels. And so she always had lots of dogs. And Mikey's one stipulation was that I want to wait for Aunt Jen to be able to go to Dog Beach with me to take Maggie. Was it Maggie?
Yeah, Maggie.
His new dog. Yeah. And so his birthday is on the 3rd, but we waited till the 9th so Aunt Jen can go. And so we were all celebrating Mikey's birthday at Dog Beach in Huntington Beach. And Jen had brought 2 of her dogs from the kennel that were her personal dogs.
Molly and Fred.
Molly and Fred, right. And then Mikey's family, which is my son and his wife's family, that was our first grandson. He brought Maggie, and then Kim and Miles came, and Missy, and so all of us were there. And we had a great day celebrating his birthday. And then I had to work the next day. So I told the kids, I've got to go. We've got to go. I've got to get home. And so we left, and Jen wanted Melissa to come work with her the next day and said, can Missy stay with me and go home with me because I need her to work with me. And I said, no, I already am going to take her to work with me. I need her tomorrow because I'm so busy. So wow. Missy,
right. It's huge.
Yeah. It was
so
huge.
Missy should have been in
right.
the car.
It's huge, yeah.
That's interesting.
And that's just was another intervention, I think, from God keeping her out. Yeah. So we went ahead and left. And the kids all decided to stop and have dinner at like Don Jose's or somewhere. And
Somewhere.
yeah, and they didn't drink at the time. Jen never drank. And so she had iced tea. They had chips and salsa. And they were all hanging out and laughing. And Jen said, I've got to go because I've got to work tomorrow. So she decided to leave. And Mike remembers saying, I wish you wouldn't go. And he said, I wish now, we always do the what if thing, but he just says, I wish I had made her stay.
We didn't change restaurants because
Yeah.
we just different restaurants.
You did change restaurants. So anyway, things happened the way they happened. And Jen was driving home by herself. So we were already at home. And so then at, I think it was 3:00 in the morning, I get that terrible call that all moms panic and worry about getting in the middle of the night where something's happened to one of your children. And as far as we had known, they were all together and they all had made it home. And Mike was so good about checking on Jen because she lived out in the country and had her horses out there and everything. And so he always called, made sure she had gotten home. And that night he did not call. It was very odd. And so we went to bed and got the call, and they really wouldn't tell me anything. They just said, do you know somebody by the name of Jennifer Gardner? And I said, yes. And she said, this is Regional Medical Center and you need to get your family here right now. And they wouldn't tell me anything. I was just, and part of you starts to not hear anything anymore. It's like your head.
Shock.
Yeah. My skin got too small for my skull and things were happening. And I just remember handing the phone to Randy, and Missy had picked up, Missy is Melissa. She had picked up the extension in her room and overheard it. So she came flying in. She was the only one living at home at that point. Everybody else had moved out and was either married or living on their own. And so she came flying into the bedroom and she was sobbing. And so I said, get dressed. We've got to go. And the things that come out when you're in that, if you've never experienced anything like this, you can't, like, I couldn't cry. It was more like a guttural moaning, like from the deepest part of my soul. Oh, it was like Randy said, I've never heard anything like it now or ever in my life. And I just kept saying, not Jen, they weren't living some high risk lifestyle. They weren't doing drugs where I was always worried about them, or she was teaching Sunday school. She had a full-time job. She was saving animals. She was living her best life. And so we all got to the hospital, and Randy called the other kids, and everybody made it to the hospital. And this was about 5:00 in the morning. And we had found out the accident actually happened at 10 the night before.
I was going to ask you that. Like, how long did it take for them to finally call you? So that's several hours.
And what had happened was, when the crash happened, and we call it a crash because when somebody chooses to drink and drive, it's not an accident. And so when the crash happened, they lost her ID while they were transporting her from the crash site by ambulance to the air flight.
But what I understand, if my wallet slid under my seat.
Your wallet slid under your seat?
That's my ID. So.
Yeah. So they didn't have her ID. So they grabbed what they thought was her purse, but they didn't have her purse. And she had been at the beach all day. So her dogs were in the back of the car. There was all this dog food. And so by the time, what happened was the bag that they had grabbed had an emergency number card on it. And it was for the kennel where she worked. And if the kennel's alarm went off, this was the chain of command you start calling. And so they just start calling those numbers and said, we have a 20-something-year-old female with blonde hair. Do you know who this person might be? And the first person they called was her boss. Wow. And she said, yes, I do. And so they gave her, she gave them our information. That's how they got a hold of us. But by this time, Jen had already been in surgery from the time of the crash until we had arrived. She was still in surgery. So she was catastrophically injured at the scene. She was hit head on by a drunk driver who was trying to pass a semi-truck. And, when you're not in the place to make a good decision, you're making multiple bad decisions. And so it was on a blind curve. And as he came around that curve, he hit her head on, and the impact was on both of the left sides of the vehicle. And so when he hit Jennifer head on, the engine was shoved into the driving compartment and trapped her and broke her leg and crushed her leg. And then she was hit from behind because there was people behind her and that couldn't stop in time. And then she was thrown off into the ditch to the right. The drunk driver was thrown back in front of the semi truck that he was trying to pass, and he was hit and killed instantly. And so then from there, she was trapped in the vehicle. And so they're having to, well, what happened was behind the people who hit her was a person named Russell. And Russell and his family just said it was just a giant ball of dirt, like, just a dirt cloud that he drove into and pulled over, and he got out to assess the situation. They're the ones that called 911 because this was out in the middle of the country. There were no street lights. It was dead black out there. And so they called 911, and he ran around to all the vehicles to make sure everybody was okay. And Jen was hanging out of the vehicle and in very bad shape. And she was telling him it hurt and she was afraid. And he held her and prayed with her. And that was one of our first miracles. So he didn't want to move her, and she was really bleeding a lot. And so finally the paramedics got there and they cut her out of the vehicle, and it took a while, and she went into full cardiac arrest in the vehicle, and they had to bag her. And that's where her second brain injury. So she has multiple brain injuries. The first one she has is shearing from the actual impact of the accident. And what they say is it's kind of like a super ball in a bowl of Jello, and you go like this, and the super ball just kind of tears through the Jello, and that's shearing brain injury. Okay. The second one is anoxia from a lack of oxygen to the brain. So, I think the first one is blood pressure. But I think that caused that. Okay. Well, then, it could be.
They're all the same.
Oh, yeah, it's all, yeah. And so the anoxia was caused because they couldn't actually get her on oxygen while they were using the jaws of life and cutting the vehicle because of the danger of it exploding, right? So they have to bag her, and they're bagging her just to try to keep oxygen going. So they got her out of the vehicle, and she went into full cardiac arrest again. And I think she went into cardiac arrest three times. So one in the vehicle, they got her heart restarted, one outside the vehicle, and then they drove her in an ambulance to the waiting helicopter, the Flight for Life, and then in the Flight for Life, they were 8.5 minutes. Yes. And so that was probably part of the other brain injury. It was just that whole. So she made it there, and she was in surgery, and the waiting rooms are all filling up with family and everything is but when you're in ICU, and I didn't realize at the time, we realize now that they don't tell you if somebody dies in a car accident, the police are going to come to your door. And I didn't know that. So I just kept thinking on the way that I had lost her. And when they finally let us in to see her, oh my gosh,
It wasn't me.
It wasn't her. It was like they had pumped her so full of IV fluids trying to stabilize her blood pressure and, throughout surgery, and they were trying to do repairs, but she was catastrophically injured. I mean, we won't go into all that, but she basically was missing her tibia bone. They had her leg wired back together. She had broken her femur. All of her facial bones were broken. Her chest was broken. Her diaphragm was ruptured. She was sewn up from head to toe. She had a chest tube. She had a collapsed lung. She had she was just, I looked down at her and wanted to just hold her, but couldn't find anywhere that there wasn't something like either a tube keeping her alive or an IV or a breathing machine. So I couldn't do anything but touch part of her arm. And, but one of the other things is going through this whole experience, and it's been 23 years this year, almost.
It's so tragic.
Is that God, even in the middle of all the darkness, he provided these little nuggets. We called them our little golden nuggets. And when you're kind of in shock and your world's been turned upside down and the rug's been pulled out of it and all the plans you made are seeming to fall by the wayside. God just kept reminding us, I'm here. I'm here. I see you. I know what you're going through. And I'm walking with you through it. So Jennifer had, I wanted to tell you about Russell. So Russell, before I get ahead of myself, he's the one that came upon and called 911. The next day he went back to work at Jennifer's high school, Woodcrest Christian High School. And he was working in the office when the call came through from Kim, my oldest daughter, to put Jen on the prayer chain because she had been in this awful accident and she was on life support in ICU at the hospital. And Russell said, I was the one that held her, that cried with her, that prayed with her while she was hanging out of that vehicle. And I need to talk to her parents because if those are the last words she said, I want him to know, their parents to know that I prayed with her before she died. And so it was really powerful that he had been able to step in where, for Randy, I think the biggest thing was you always want to protect your daughters. And he beat himself up because he wasn't there. Mm. And so Russell said, God, let me step in for you. And that was huge for him. But anyway, so that was like the beginning of just this huge, long journey that we're still on, aren't we?
Yes, again.
But the trauma of it was that Jennifer, they told us at the beginning, the first 2 months, they told us she wasn't going to survive. Her prognosis was really, really bad. She had catastrophic injuries, and every week they were taking her in to do some major surgery of some kind. And we were having to make huge medical decisions. And we were thrown into this world where in my book that I'm writing, it's like you're thrown onto a different planet. You don't understand the language. You don't understand the mannerisms. And you have to try to function in this. And half the time you're in shock. You don't hear most of the things that people are saying to you. I was not able to be even comforted because I just felt so lost. And I can just remember crying out to the Lord every day, crying. Why? I thought we were doing all the things that you wanted us to do. I thought we were where you wanted us to be. I thought, we just had all these things we thought, and I just didn't have any idea why God would rip that all out from under us. And so it was hard, but I remember him saying to me, you can't see the path in front of you because I want to lead you step by step. And that's what he did. So every day there was enough just in that day to get through it to the next day. And I think he knew that's all I could do. And so every day I just had to kind of regroup and refocus. And we were really, really fortunate because our pastor at that time at the church, the little church we went to where Jen was in the children's ministry, he was getting ready to go off and do some missionary work and start a new church somewhere. And he had actually stepped down. And so he came to the hospital every day. Yeah. And he prayed with us over Jen because every night we would pray over Jen. And so it was such a blessing. For 2 months, he sat in the hospital with us, him and his wife, and prayed over Jen. And when you're in ICU in that kind of critical condition, you can only get in to see your loved ones for 10 minutes every 2 hours. And so all the people there, all the other family members would just sit all day waiting for their 10 minutes. My mom flew in, my brothers flew, it was just, it was crazy. And so she was in the hospital for a long time. She was on life support for a long time. She was in a coma for 5.5 months. And the neurologist told us that her prognosis was really bad, that we should plan on putting her in a home because, usually if you're in a coma for more than 2 weeks, for you to come out of a coma and have any kind of mental recognition of people or your life or many memories is very rare. And so he said, her prognosis is not very good. She's probably not ever going to be able to walk or do anything again. You need to probably, but I just kept telling all the doctors, you don't know my God. I'm just standing firm on, you just don't know what God has for her. Do not give up on her. Do not. And it started this huge fight for me to fight for her because she had no voice and I was her only voice. And I was not going to let any one of those doctors just write her off as a statistic. And so we just sat in that hospital and prayed and were there for every little thing. And I caught major things in that hospital with her that they're long stories, but they helped save her because they are watching so many patients and I was only watching this patient. And so we saw things happening that we alerted the doctors to that they didn't see. And so when her diaphragm ruptured and her intestines went into her chest cavity, that was a huge one. And they missed it.
Wow, they missed that. Huh?
So
it's so important to have an advocate.
It is. It's really important. And that was it. When somebody can't speak for themselves, it's really, God put me there. And I remember my mom used to say, she used to say, whenever she felt overwhelmed by the situation, she would say, I'm going to put on my red lipstick and I'm going to go do it. And it became like our little mantra that, mentally, when we as women put on our makeup, we don't want to cry. We want to be tough. And it's like our badge. It's like our shield, right? That God tells us our armor, put on our armor. That's what I felt like during that time. And I remember like after the 4th or 5th or 6th day, I can't even remember. I told Randy, I've got to go home. I've got to take a shower and I'm going to put my makeup on. And I'm going to put my red lipstick on and I'm coming back because I've got a battle to fight here for Jen. And I cannot cry anymore because they don't hear me when I'm crying. I'm just a hysterical mom that's losing her daughter. And I needed to find that inner strength. And mentally, for me, that's how I had to do it. And God just helped me to get it together enough to come back and start that fight. And it's just been a fight all the way.
Never give up.
Never give up, right?
So it's interesting. She was 23 when it happened, and now it's been 23 years. So she's been alive, in one way for the same amount of time as you've been living now this way.
And we were younger than she is when it happened.
Oh, as parents, you were younger? Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
So she's older than I was when this happened to us. So that's a weird thing, too. When we started making those crossover, years, it's like
amazing.
Wow.
So she was in the hospital for 8 months and she was on life support for 5.5, 6 months. And when you come out of a coma, you don't just come out of a coma.
But it's not like the movies.
It's not like the movies.
No.
And I'll tell you that Randy was there every day with us. And this one day my mom had come in and my mom said, I want to take you. Let's go get something to eat. Let's go to the mall and just go regular shopping. It had been months and months and months since I'd been out of the hospital. And so Randy said, I'll stay with Jen. Go with your mom. So we went over to the Ontario Mills Mall and we were sitting in the mall having dinner. And there was this lady with her daughter, her handicapped daughter in a wheelchair, and she was feeding her. And I can remember crying, telling my mom, I would be happy with that. I would be happy if I could get that back. And thinking, how far I had come from, you're hoping for grandkids. But now I would just I didn't want to lose her. And that day we went back to the hospital, and every night before we left her in the hospital, we always prayed over her. And this day she had, when you're coming out of a coma, it's like your eyes are kind of open but the lights are on, but nobody's home kind of a look, you're kind of glassed over. Yeah. So when Randy said to Jen, we got to go. We're going to pray for you now. Jen closed her eyes. And when we were done praying, she opened her eyes. And the nurse said, somebody's there. They didn't know that she was even mentally aware anybody was there. She had been in this coma so long. And that was another miracle. I mean, we had so many of these gold nuggets along the way. And from that point, she started to slowly come out of it and wake up. And after all said and done, she lost about 2 weeks of her memory, which is a miracle. She lost the accident and she lost all the time, obviously, in the coma. But I mean, before the coma. And then, but she had all her childhood memories. They told us she wouldn't have any of that. She knew who all of us were. She mouthed, the first thing she mouthed to us, because she had no voice anymore, she was on life support. And she mouthed, she spelled out, I love you. Oh, it was very sad. And then the second thing she spelled out was no more male nurses. She was so modest her whole life. She did not like those male nurses.
Oh my
gosh. It was funny. The nurses were so excited that she was cognitive enough to be making that kind of huge. That's huge.
That is.
And so they put it up on the whiteboard behind her bed. No male nurses. It was really funny. And but she had to go through the whole process of learning to swallow, learning to talk, learning to she's in a wheelchair. She does not have a spinal cord injury, but she can't walk from the brain injury. It's all like, when the motherboard goes bad, you lose control. And so it's almost like she's had a stroke because she's lost the one leg. We ended up losing her leg, and she ended up losing her leg. And the one good leg she has control of is the one with the prosthetic. So the other one is
bumbling.
It's a
Yeah.
And she has a bad hand. We call it the bad hand. It has its mind of its own.
Sorry.
See?
I take the microphone.
Yeah.
But it's been a journey, and every step of the way, God just continued to remind us that this was truly a ministry of love for her. And we ended up mentoring other moms that were going through similar things that we had been through. We ended up starting a prayer group in the ICU, and people would come from all over to pray with us every night. I wrote a little book that we've left in hospitals all over about how to cope with an ICU situation and trauma. And, in the middle of all the darkness, when you think that nobody else is there, because this isn't something anybody can really prepare you for. I thought I would be prepared for something like this. You just think I can do anything for the Lord. But it just really knocks the wind out of you. And just to know that God just continued to send us those little nuggets to remind me that he was there when I felt like he had left us.
Yeah.
So, and then she came home after, and our whole lives changed. They told us, we should probably put her somewhere in a facility, but I told them, no, you just don't know what God has planned for her. And I just really believe that people do so much better when surrounded by family and love. And she's just done amazingly well. Like, her brain injury is mostly physical.
Well, mostly.
What else is it, Jen?
It's
your vision. You're
vision,
legally blind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Visually impaired. Yes, she prefers vision.
There's a difference.
Okay. So she can no longer read.
speech.
So she has kind of like a checkerboard. So she has clear spots, blind spots, and blurry spots. And so she can't read because she can't track the words to put them all together. So everything she does has to be done audibly. So we got some computers set up that read to her. But because she only has one good hand, and it's her left, which she was right-handed, right? So they taught her at therapy Morse code. And so she has a dot and a dash button, and it types for her on the computer. So she's on Facebook. She has a book club. We're going through Proverbs now. She's posting Proverbs every day on Facebook. She writes letters. So it's
And her blog.
and her blog. She told her story. Yeah, you want to tell why you decided to do that?
People need to know.
People need to know.
Yes. Well, my story is not easy, but it happens all the time. And then everyone dies to get a picture driver. So they need hope. Know there's hope still.
Yeah.
And I know.
So, she used to save all the dogs and animals at the shelter. And they used to call her Schindler because she would go through with her notebook at the shelter, and all the dogs that were going to be euthanized, she would go through and pick the ones out that she thought she could save. And she would take them back to her shelter. And so I remember
they all had a number.
They all had a number.
Yeah.
And I remember her telling me after this was all over, she's always been so strong, that I'm glad it was me this happened to, because I don't think any of the other kids could have handled it. And she said, I really feel like God has called me now. Do you want to tell me?
Mm-hmm. This is my ministry.
Yeah.
I have the strength to fight for people. I know.
She said, I used to save dogs, but now I need to save people.
People more important. Well, to God maybe, but.
So we started doing the every 15-minute program because we felt like Jen said, I think what happens,
I was very active in the community.
She was very active in the community. She had her own little cable show. She did all.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I came across it one time and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And the community was so good to her because when she was in the accident,
I didn't deserve it, but that was so good to me. Yeah.
When she was in the crash, we had such a huge turnout. They had to use the Riverside Convention Center for the blood donors. And it was huge. And it was in the newspaper. It made all the newspapers. And as the people, I still have them all. They came together to donate blood because she needed so much blood. And so she used to do all this stuff in the community, and the community just really rallied around her. And it was such a blessing for us because, you think of your kid, she's young and is she making an impact? And it was just given, that was just a blessing given back to us that she was making such a difference in other people's lives. So, but she said, I need to do something because I think what happens when your life changes like this, you can't go back to doing what you were doing. So we had to try to find some new things that would be important. And I used to tell Jen, we have the right to be really mad. And I would tell you have the right to be really mad and upset and walk around and hold on to that if you want. You have that right because this is not fair to have this happen to you. And you didn't do anything wrong and you didn't deserve it. And he stole your whole life. Or we could just pray over this and let God use it to do some good for other people and make some sense out of what happened. And I said, and not hold on to all that and use that energy to do the best work we can now and you to get as good as you can get. And so Jen said to me, I want to do that. And so we decided Matt asked us to step in and do the every 15-minute program. And so we would go and talk and tell our story to all the high school kids.
It was powerful too.
It was very powerful. And a lot of kids came to know the Lord through that. And we would do
this one boy, I remember, his father, felt like he was lost. I think that was the
repeat offenders.
Repeat offenders, yeah. But he said, after he spoke, he went back to church, he saved his life, and he was out baptized in the Christ.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. So what happened was we would do a repeat offender program at the hospital where the judges order you to go to these classes and that you have to pay to go. And the people are there with major attitude problems. They all sit in their chairs like this, looking at you, and they have big chips on their shoulder. And they've said to us, I hope you don't think I hope I don't have to sit here and listen to this. So we would do them, and I would totally pray with Jen over this, because I did not like doing these. It was not like
a lot.
You're into torturing me. It was not like talking to the kids, because the kids had just gone through this really reenactment of a crash with all their best friends, and so they are so open, and we were really trying to make an impact so they wouldn't drink and drive during prom. But when you do these repeat offender programs, they're mad that they're in trouble. They got caught. They don't want to quit drinking usually. And I just remember telling Jen, I feel like I'm casting pearls before swine. I don't want to do it. And Jen would say, Mom, God loves everybody, even all those drunk drivers. She loves them. And he's calling us to do this. And I said, but I have to do all the talking, and I can see them. And she couldn't see them, right? She couldn't see the faces that they were making. And I said, I just don't. So I just remember this one time praying over it. And God just really encouraged me to bring my journal. And I had never done that. Jen had never even heard my journal. And I thought, I don't even have words anymore to speak to these people. They're so angry. And I just started reading my journal, and it just started to melt off of them. Their arms came down. They were sad. And so after this one, she's talking about this father and his son were both in the program. They were both repeat offenders. And his son was underage. He was in high school. And so it was so horrible. So anyway, Jen, we talked to him, and the father came up, I think, after the program and thanked us.
I think the son maybe hugged me. I know.
Anyway, we went to see the Passion of the Christ. It had to be 2 years later. I don't know, a year later.
Yeah, a long time later, yeah. We weren't doing anymore.
And in the crowd, we see the Sky waving his arm at us. And Randy's like, okay, you guys stay here. I'm going to go see what's going on over there. And he said, I have to get to Jen. And so he brought us in over. He said, I want you to know that you totally changed our lives. We left that day forever changed, that we both rededicated our lives to the Lord. My son's back in school. He's getting straight A's. And it was huge. It was so huge. And Jen just said, this is what God has called us to do now. And so that made it all worth it that day that I didn't want to.
Yeah. Wow. It's so amazing that he gave you that confirmation, though.
Yeah.
To be able to know that it really did affect somebody and make an impact.
Yeah.
And every school I spoke at, now when the class, people from the class, died from drug trafficking.
Right. So at the schools that she spoke at, we have had a really good record with them not drinking and driving. And so it's been
impactful.
Yeah. It's been a strong story. And, our story is that you always hear, oh, they were hit by a drunk driver and they
lived.
They were injured. And so you just assume they just went back to their life. But Jen is still in therapy. She still has to have surgery. We're having a procedure done next week for her breathing. The life support that kept her alive this whole time is now causing scar tissue to close up her windpipe. And so it's trying to kill her now. So we're still fighting for her every single day. But she's on Facebook and she loves the Lord. We all love the Lord. And if he hadn't have been there to walk us through, even though there were times in my life I just wanted to curl up in a ball and just have everybody just leave me alone. But he would just gently bring me up and say, I'm going to walk with you through this dark time and we'll get through it. And that was huge. A lot of red lipstick. A lot of red lipstick.
It's important.
It's important.
Well, yeah. So I was telling you guys earlier, and Jen specifically, I didn't know the entirety of the story because I had been living a little bit far away from you guys at the time. So I only heard bits and pieces. But then when I got to read your blog, I got to know a lot more about it. But what made me want to interview you was your faith in the Lord, and how even on Facebook that she's very open about her faith and always having hope, and it's just a light to all that read it. And that really stuck with me. And so, knowing even the little bit that I had known, which I just recently got to read all of the blog. I'd only read one before, but you've written a lot more since, and explains a lot more of your story. It really is an incredible testimony.
Pictures.
Yeah, of not being bitter or angry, but instead using that. And you truly are making beauty from the ashes.
Thank you.
And so I just admire that about you guys.
Thanks.
Yeah,
You're really amazing.
I
have a very forgiving heart, so.
You do. You always have a very forgiving heart.
Absolutely do.
Anger. Never anger here.
Yeah, there's no room for
bitterness or resentment or those things.
When she lost her leg, she wasn't like, one of the things that doctors are always amazed about with her is that her attitude, her faith.
Yeah.
And the fact that she didn't go into depression, because a lot of people.
I bawled.
Or what?
I bawled.
You bawled.
You told me about my leg.
I know that was the only time though, but they're always.
The next day was fine.
I know.
Like a little kid, that was fine.
The next day, and she would. So she would not. She didn't hold any anger. And I remember the psychologist at the hospital kept coming in, and I would come in at night, and I could tell something was wrong. Connie, you even remember her name? Her memory got way better after the accident. Okay, I just want you to know. I always tell her, okay, she gets to remember everything for me because I'm losing mine and she's remembering. But she would say, you really need to grieve the leg. We need to have like a mental burial, and we need to let you grieve the leg. And so I would come in and she would be really depressed. And she's just not really a depressing person. And so I had to get to the bottom of it. So I said, what is going on that you're like this when I come? She said, Connie. So I went in to see Connie.
It's Connie.
Connie. And Connie was telling me how it's not healthy, that she's not depressed about her leg, that she lost her leg. She's only 23 years old, and blah, blah. And so, a lot of it, sometimes they say, oh, it must be the brain injury or something, but it wasn't. And I knew. And so, Jen and I talked about it a long time that night in the hospital. And I said, again, you have the right to be upset and depressed. And I said, or we can just be thankful that you only lost a leg. And, we have you, and we can just thank God for that and move forward. And Jen said, I want to do that. And I said, okay, how about if let's let everyone know that no more Connie.
Yep.
So now it says no male nurses, no Connie.
That was a different hospital. Even today we're going into the procedure, and the hospital calls me today and says, how is her mental mood and everything? Is she depressed? No, she's never been depressed. So, and not that I'm saying you can't be, because I probably was more than, but she just knew.
Sad days.
Yeah. I think the only time she really broke out audibly, she had never made a word, never made a sound since her coma. She was in this coma. She was coming out of the coma. And she couldn't talk. She was still on life support. And she had asked, and I'll tell you this really quick. Is this okay if I tell you? Okay. So absolutely. We always had family meetings every night. What are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? This is funny. So all the kids were there. We all, would pray over her. Grandma was there. And we decided that if Jen woke up from her coma, that because she had lost her leg. And by the time she was waking up for the coma, the leg had already healed. So she didn't know she had no leg. So how are we going to tell her she has no leg, right? So we decided we would have a family meeting, and we would all get together and come in and tell her about her leg so she could, but she was just getting out of her coma, and I was so afraid that some emotional shock like that would throw her back into a coma, or she couldn't talk. So how could she ask us questions? So I was trying to give her some time to kind of get her wherewithal and where she was. Yes, that is exactly right. So she asked, tell her.
If it is a lot, I first to my right foot, never my left foot. So
Yeah. And she asked Missy, was there visiting her? And she asked Missy,
bring me a shoe.
bring me a shoe because I can't feel my foot.
Oh.
Missy freaked out.
Missy freaked out.
Oh,
She's calling us from the car. Mom. And I said, okay, we need to get the family together. This is probably the time we need to all go in and tell Jen about her leg, right?
Missy was in there.
Nobody was there.
No.
So what happened was everyone said, Mike said, I can't go. She'll hate me forever. I can't go because I don't want her to know we all decided to do it. So Mike couldn't do it. Kim wouldn't come. Missy didn't go. So it was me and Randy going out all by ourselves. And because they just were so heartbroken that they had to make that decision. It was too hard for them to.
So where's my shoe?
Yes, where her shoe was. And so we had to tell her. And this person who had not made a whimper in 6 months made this most horrible audible cry.
Wailing sound, yeah.
The nurses all ran in to see what happened. They thought something horrible had happened.
Yeah, so
And we were all sobbing at this time. I think besides the accident, that was the hardest thing I had to do was tell her about her leg. And
Grandma's right, but I'm going to do it without a leg.
My mom kept saying, don't let him take her leg. What's she going to do without a leg? I said, she has no, her brain, she can't use her leg. So anyway, that was terrible. And we couldn't leave her. She was sobbing. She had never cried about anything in her accident. And then she said to me, again, that I'm okay. I'm okay. That God had a reason for this. And then I came to see her the next day and she said, I'm just glad it was me and nobody else because they couldn't have done it. They just couldn't have done it. And I know they couldn't have done it.
No.
And then she was okay.
I really think about that.
Yeah.
Like how that would be changed. And I know I was the only one of the best option. So if it had to happen to
You were
somebody,
the most strong and powerful. And God knew who to use.
Because I never planned to get married. Maybe I like to get married, but I didn't have plans. Didn't have a boyfriend or anything. So it's me, males, and God.
And that's really a kind of a wrap. So I was going to tell you that what's really special is that she wanted to get a service dog. Because, I've been the service dog for 20 years.
Yeah.
She dropped something. I know. So she wanted a service dog, but I didn't really want another giant dog in the house. And she didn't believe in the whole golden retriever thing.
Yeah, they breed them special.
Yeah. So
I like that breed.
Anyway, Missy didn't want this little Boston Terrier that we had wanted. And so I said, well, I think that was supposed to be our dog anyway. So we'll take her. And Jen trained that dog to be a service dog. And that
from day one, she was my dog.
She was the best dog. And she did. And we had her state certified. She went everywhere with us. And she would pick up, I have video of her picking up all Jen's clothes, picking up keys, picking up brushes. She did everything for Jen, everything. And so it was kind of, I told Randy, it was like full circle that Jen saved all those dogs, all of her young adult life. And now God had turned it around and brought this special dog to save her. And they were like best friends.
Yeah, she was great.
Yeah.
I remember all the pictures you would post of her.
She was awesome.
We lost her in December 19. But now we have a crazy dog. But so
the crazy one.
God is good through the middle of hard. It doesn't mean we're not going to experience. The world is a hard place.
Yes.
The world is really a hard place. And even when you're not doing the bad things, you can be in a hard place. And we just want to encourage everybody that God never gives up on us, never. And even though you may not
even if you give up on him, he doesn't give up on you. Usually.
And even if you don't feel him maybe all the time, he's still there. And he would remind us and nudge us with these little nuggets that he sent our way to let us know that he still had Jen. He still was working on Jen. And she's a miracle. The neurologist wanted to see her. He couldn't believe she was cognitive. He couldn't believe she could talk. He couldn't believe. So we took her back to the hospital so he could see her. And we took her back to the ICU unit so the nurses could see her, because we wanted her to let them know that all their efforts.
Thank them, basically.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank them and all their efforts. What a difference it made in her life. Because when they admitted her, they had lost her ID. She was admitted as Jane Hydro Doe. When you're admitted to the hospital and they don't know who you are, you get a Jane Doe, and your middle name is by alphabet the number you are. So she was the 8th Jane Doe that night.
Oh my gosh.
And so
wow.
Small hospital too, but
Jane Hydro Doe, that was her name for months. It took me forever to get, because I wanted them to know she wasn't a Jane Doe. But
well,
yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, it's a lot of really great, God really has worked miracles, and Jen's healthy and we do good and we have fun and our life's different, but it's still blessed and powerful, and God can still use it, right?
Totally.
And I think that's the most powerful message in all of this, because it does seem like your life was over, so to speak, in the way that you knew it. So now you have to create this new life and find the purpose in it. And you've done an amazing job of that.
Thanks.
Such an incredible testimony.
She is an inspiration to us every day. Every day.
Thanks.
And I live with her every day.
Yeah. It's hard.
Yeah. And everybody's life's changed. When you make a bad decision, it affects more than just the person. It's affected it affected our community, our family, her life, and so we want people to really.
I lost all my animals.
Yeah, you lost all your animals. We had horses. We raised horses. We had to get rid of all the horses. But my overflow kennels has to close down. Yeah, the overflow kennels. Nobody's doing that job anymore. But we're looking forward to Christ coming back now, aren't we?
Hey, heck yeah! I'm always ready.
Glorified bodies. We want.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Was there anything else you want to share before we close?
What else do you want to share? Anything?
No. I mean, I'm going to have a book, so.
Yeah, if anybody.
If you want to contact me and her.
Yeah, so you are writing a book. So tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll put your contact info in the comments. So if anybody wants to reach out to you and just talk about, maybe something that's going on in their life that's similar, and they found inspiration in your story, then they can reach out to you that way.
Sure. I wrote my story many, many years ago when it was still really fresh and raw. And I never had an ending for it because we're still in the throes of our story, really. And I don't want to write about 20 years of therapy and doctors. So God hadn't given me an ending, but God gave me the ending last year. So I'm going to end the book, and I wanted to end on a good note, right? So, so I'm going to finish that up, but it is actually through my eyes and the mom and what we went through, and how statistically our marriage shouldn't have survived, and how the family shouldn't have survived, and how God got us through all that. But we also wrote a small little pamphlet that we hand out at all the hospitals. And when we would go do our every 15-minute program, we would hand this booklet out. And it's really for people who are in the throes of a ICU situation, a catastrophic injury, hip brain injury for them or a loved one. And it just helps them. It was really more of like tips to navigate through the craziness of the hospital emergency stuff.
The explanation of coma scale.
Yeah, it gives you almost like explanations of the words that they're using, because you're like, I don't even know what that means. The Glasgow scale and all those things. When you're not in that world, you don't know. And that's how they rate people with brain injuries.
Comas.
Or comas. Okay, thank you. And then Jen has her blog that she wrote. So I want you guys to know that she wrote that. She learned Morse code and typed it all with Morse code, dot and dashes. And so it's not perfectly written, but we're going through it because you really have, the way the blog is, you have to scroll all the way to the bottom and start and then read up, And so we're putting it more in a book format. And I think the reason we did that, and she wanted to write it to be able to reach out to more people on the internet and stuff. So we would send out her blog. But is that my grandkids, none of my grandkids, Mikey was
six.
Nobody remembers her out of the wheelchair, and they don't know her story. And so for our own family, I wanted to remember so that we don't repeat. Yeah. And that was our goal, that, how special it was with Jen when, Mike used to ride the horses with us, and but they don't remember her out of a wheelchair. And so she did have a life before that. And we wanted them to know her story because most of them don't, right?
Yeah.
So
what is the URL for the blog in case anybody wants to?
Oh, a cracked vessel.wordpress.com.
A crackedvessel.wordpress.com. Yeah.
It's never relevant. I better go back and fix it,
but we're taking off of that. And then I helped her insert pictures. She put pictures in, but it was really an outreach for people to be able to send people there and really see how bad it could be if you're not drinking and driving. And our drunk driver lost too. He lost his life. And his kids lost? His kids all lost their dad. And so, it's always a lose-lose for everybody. There's nobody comes out of this unscathed. Everybody's a loser. So,
well, it's a great reminder. And I thank you guys for your courage to share your story and your willingness to just answer questions. And I think it's so important because there's so many people that are struggling with maybe not the exact issue, but, catastrophic things.
Yeah, right.
And hearing your story and your point of view and how you are living now is really inspirational.
I think everybody has a story.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's important story.
Yeah.
Everyone's story is important. So they shouldn't keep it in.
Yeah. Everybody has an important story to tell, right?
Yeah.
God has us all here for the reason, a right reason.
Yeah.
So, and now, when we had it happen, it was drunk driving, but now it's texting. Now it's driving tired.
Yes.
So we're finding a lot more of driving high, a lot more of those kind of issues where, really back when Jen was her 20 years ago, texting wasn't an issue. It was like nobody was texting then. So,
I bet I had a cell phone.
Yeah.
A flip phone.
Oh.
I never texted on it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It's way worse now.
Yeah, it is. It's just compounded, I think. So anyway, but thanks for having us. We are always welcome to share. And if anybody's interested in the little pamphlets, we're more than happy to send those out to whoever might want them. I probably will put it in a PDF and make it downloadable now. Back then I didn't know how to do all that. So.
All right, that's great. So some people will listen audibly. So if you want to give your email address, then that would be good. And then I'll also put it in the comments of the YouTube.
Okay. So you can also leave a comment on Jen's blog if you want. If they go on and read her blog, they want to.
Although I don't get the email.
Oh, okay. So
they email me directly
or me. So mine is DD and then my last name, HAB as in boy, ICHT @gmail.com.
Okay.
And then Jen's is Jam and Jen. So it's JAMM and then JEN.
JAMMIN.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So she's going to correct. JAMMINJENJEN @gmail.com.
Okay.
Because you're jamming, right?
Jamming. Yeah. Well, it was so great to see you guys again.
Thanks,
and thank you again for sharing your story. I really appreciate it. And so I guess that's it.
Okay. Thanks for having us.
Well, my pleasure. So thank you all for listening. And I hope that it touched you and blessed you. And if you know anybody that would benefit from hearing this story, please feel free to share and have a great day. Thanks so much. Thank you all for listening and for joining us today. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you next time.